What if the problem is not that you are alone, but that you have been taught to treat aloneness like a punishment? That is the first wound the art of being alone tries to open carefully. Renuka Gavrani is not selling the fantasy of a perfect solo life where nobody needs anybody and every quiet evening becomes a cinematic healing montage. She begins with a more honest distinction. Loneliness is the cage. Solitude is the home. One makes you feel rejected by the world. The other lets you return to yourself without begging the world to explain your worth. Welcome to this summary of the art of being alone by Renuka Gavrani. In this first episode, we follow the book's opening movement. Why loneliness hurts, why pretending to be fine makes it worse, and why solitude only becomes powerful after you stop using it as a mask. The book starts from a familiar modern contradiction. People are connected all day and still feel unseen. Message arrive. Feeds refresh. Someone is always posting a life that looks warmer, fuller, funnier, and better lit than yours. Yet the more you compare, the more your own room can feel like evidence against you. You begin to think everyone else belongs somewhere, and I am the one standing outside the glass. Gavrani pushes back against the way people romanticize loneliness. There is a version of aloneness that looks poetic from the outside. Sad music, late-night thoughts, a lonely person becoming mysterious and deep. But the book is blunt that loneliness is not automatically wisdom. Sometimes it is just pain that has learned to decorate itself. Loneliness becomes dangerous when it convinces you that being unwanted is your identity. A cancel plan feels like proof. A slow reply feels like proof. A group photo without you feels like proof. The mind starts building a private courtroom, and every small event becomes another witness testifying that you are forgettable. The book's first practical lesson is to stop confusing a feeling with a final verdict. Loneliness is real, but it is not always accurate. It tells you that connection is missing, or that you are craving attention, safety, recognition, affection, or belonging. But it can also exaggerate. It can turn one quiet day into a life sentence. Gavrani is especially interested in the loneliness that comes from hiding your true self. This is the pain of being around people and still feeling alone because the person they know is only the polished version. You smile when something hurts. You say yes when your whole body is tired. You make yourself easier to accept by editing out your needs, your opinions, your weirdness, your intensity, your sadness, and your actual dreams. That kind of loneliness is brutal because it does not disappear in company. In fact, company can make it louder. You can sit in a room full of people and feel the distance between your performed self and your real self stretching like a wire inside your chest. Everyone thinks they are close to you, but they are close to the version you built for survival. The book asks why people hide this way. Sometimes the answer is simple. Rejection taught them. Maybe they were laughed at when they were sincere. Maybe they were called too sensitive, too emotional, too ambitious, too quiet, too strange, too much. Maybe love felt conditional, so they learned to become whatever the room rewarded. Over time, the mask becomes automatic. You do not wake up and announce, "Today, I will betray myself for social approval." That would at least be honest. Instead, you make tiny edits. You swallow a preference. You soften an opinion. You act less excited. You pretend not to care. You copy someone else's definition of normal. Then one day you wonder why nobody knows you. This is where Gavrani's tone becomes both gentle and demanding. She does not shame the reader for hiding. The mask probably protected something once. But she also refuses to let the reader call that mask a personality. If you keep hiding, the world may accept you more easily, but it will not be accepting you. It will be accepting your performance. The move from loneliness to solitude begins with telling the truth inwardly. Before you can be real with others, you have to become real with yourself. What do you actually feel? What do you actually want? What part of your life is built from fear? Where are you being agreeable because disagreement feels like abandonment? This is not glamorous work. It can feel embarrassing. Many people discover that they do not know their own preferences because they have spent years scanning other people first. They know what gets approval. They know what avoids conflict. They know what keeps them included. But alone, without an audience, they feel strangely blank. The book treats that blankness as a starting point, not a failure. Solitude gives you a room where your borrowed identities can lose their volume. When there is no one to impress, you can notice what remains. You can hear your own boredom, anger, grief, curiosity, hunger, and hope. At first, it may not sound like peace. It may sound like a crowd of neglected voices asking why you took so long. Gavrani's central contrast matters here. Loneliness says, "No one is here, so I am nothing." Solitude says, "No one is here, so I can finally meet myself." The outside situation may look similar. The inner relationship is completely different. The book also warns against using other people as anesthesia. When silence hurts, it is tempting to fill it immediately. Another chat, another scroll, another person to impress, another distraction, another fantasy relationship, another little performance of being busy. Some of that is normal. But if every quiet moment must be drowned, you never learn what the quiet is trying to show you. This first episode is not about becoming antisocial. Gavrani is not arguing that connection is weak or that needing love is pathetic. Human beings need belonging. The difference is whether belonging becomes a place you visit freely or a place you crawl toward because you cannot stand yourself alone. The book wants aloneness to become a training ground. In solitude, you practice telling the truth without applause. You practice noticing your needs without turning them into drama. You practice doing things because they matter to you, not because they photograph well. You practice becoming less addicted to external permission. There's a quiet courage in that. A person who cannot be alone is easy to steer. Approval becomes a leash. Fear becomes a manager. Every relationship becomes a negotiation for self-worth. But a person who can sit with themselves, even imperfectly, becomes harder to manipulate. They may still want love, but they do not auction their identity for it. By the end of this opening movement, Gavrani has not solved loneliness with a slogan. She has separated two experiences that people often blur together. Loneliness is the ache of disconnection, sometimes sharpened by self-abandonment. Solitude is the chosen space where you stop abandoning yourself. Thank you for listening to this first episode. Next, we move into the heart of part 1. How to be yourself, why solitude can become an act of self-respect, and how the book turns being alone from a feared condition into a deliberate homecoming. Final close. Being alone becomes painful when it feels like exile, but it becomes powerful when it becomes the first place you stop performing. One reason the book's opening distinction matters is that loneliness often disguises itself as destiny. When you're lonely for long enough, the feeling stops saying, "I am visiting," and starts saying, "I am who you are." Gavrani keeps pulling the reader away from that trap. A season of disconnection is not the same as a permanent identity. A painful pattern is not the same as your final story. She also gives the reader permission to be honest about the uglier side of loneliness. It can make you jealous of people you love. It can make you needy and then ashamed of being needy. It can make you check a message thread too many times, replay a conversation, imagine rejection before it happens, or act uninterested because wanting anything feels too exposed. The point is not to mock these reactions. The point is to notice how much power loneliness has when it remains unnamed. The book's answer begins with self-observation. Instead of instantly judging yourself for feeling lonely, ask what the feeling is attached to. Did it come after comparison? After silence from a specific person? After pretending all day? After spending time with people who make you perform? After scrolling through lives that look polished and complete? This turns loneliness from a monster into a message. It may still hurt, but it becomes less mysterious. Gavrani's work also depends on separating solitude from social failure. Many people enter alone time as if they have already lost. A Friday night alone becomes evidence. Eating alone becomes evidence. Traveling alone becomes evidence. The book wants to remove that courtroom logic. Alone is not automatically a sentence passed against you. Alone is sometimes just a condition, and what you do inside that condition matters. This is why the book keeps returning to the self you hide. If loneliness only meant lack of people, then any crowd would cure it. But many people feel loneliest in relationships where they are not allowed to be fully real. They are surrounded but not met. They are included but not known. They are praised but for a role they are tired of playing. That kind of loneliness can become a turning point because it asks a harder question. Where am I cooperating with my own invisibility? Where am I teaching people that the edited version is all there is? Where am I calling it peace when I am really avoiding the risk of being seen? The book does not demand that you reveal everything to everyone. That would be reckless and also deeply annoying at parties. To some it matters, but it does ask you to stop disappearing from yourself. Even if the outside world receives only selected parts of you, your inner life must stop being a place where the truth is banned. The first practical exercise, then, is simple. Spend time alone without performing strength. Let the loneliness speak. Write down what it says. Notice which sentences are facts and which are fears wearing formal clothes. No one texted me tonight is a fact. No one will ever choose me is a prediction made by pain, and pain is not a licensed fortune teller. Once you can separate fact from fear, solitude becomes safer. You are no longer trapped with a vague emotional storm. You are sitting with information. Some of it may ask for action. Some of it may ask for grief. Some of it may ask for rest. And some of it may simply ask you to stop turning one quiet moment into a complete theory of your worth. This first section also prepares the rest of the book. The goal is not to become someone who never feels lonely. That would be a strange and probably impossible target. The goal is to become someone who can feel lonely without abandoning themselves. Someone who can desire connection without surrendering identity. Someone who can be alone without treating the silence as proof of failure. There's also a quiet social lesson in the opening chapters. People often assume that the cure for loneliness is simply more people, but Gavrani's argument is more precise. The cure is truer connection, and truer connection begins with a self that is less hidden. If you keep presenting only the agreeable, polished, low-maintenance version of yourself, then even kind people may never know where to meet you. This does not mean you need to confess your entire emotional history to the next person who asks how you are. Please do not turn the grocery line into a memoir launch. It means you start practicing honesty in proportionate ways. Say what you prefer. Admit when something matters. Let trusted people see a little more of the real feeling. Stop acting entertained by things that drain you. Stop laughing at jokes that make you feel smaller. These are small openings in the cage. The book's emotional intelligence is that it understands why this is frightening. Being unknown is painful, but being known and rejected can feel worse. That fear is why the mask survives. The mask promises safety. If they reject this version, at least they did not reject the real me. But the same mask also blocks intimacy. It protects you from one kind of wound while guaranteeing another kind of loneliness. So the first part of the book is not really about enjoying empty rooms. It is about recovering the self that enters any room. Solitude gives you rehearsal space. You can practice saying the truth to yourself before saying it to others. You can notice which truths feel dangerous. You can decide which relationships have earned more honesty and which have not. The result is a more grounded kind of aloneness. You may still want company, but you're no longer using company to avoid self-recognition. You may still hurt when you're excluded, but exclusion does not automatically erase you. You may still feel the ache of silence, but silence becomes a place where you can listen instead of only panic. The strangest part of becoming yourself is realizing how much of yourself was outsourced. Other people told you what is impressive. Algorithms told you what is desirable. Friends told you what is normal. Family told you what is acceptable. Somewhere inside all that noise, your own voice may still be speaking, but softly, because it has learned not to interrupt. Welcome back to this summary of the art of being alone. In this episode, we follow Gavrani's move from the pain of hiding into the practice of being yourself, and then into her love for solitude. The chapter on how to be you begins with a deceptively simple idea. You cannot build a peaceful life by constantly betraying your own nature. The book does not use authenticity as a fashionable sticker. It treats it as daily behavior. Being yourself means noticing where you are pretending, where you're people-pleasing, where you're shrinking, where you are copying, and where you're treating someone else's approval as the final judge. This is difficult because imitation often begins innocently. You admire someone. You borrow a style, a goal, a phrase, a rhythm of living. There is nothing wrong with learning for people. The problem begins when admiration turns into self-erasure. You stop asking, what can I learn from them? And start asking, how can I become acceptable by becoming less like me? Gavrani's answer is not loud rebellion. She is not telling the reader to become dramatic for the sake of being different. The goal is not to perform uniqueness. That is just another costume, and frankly, a tiring one. The goal is to become honest in small, repeated ways. Honesty starts with preferences. What do you like when no one is judging? What kind of day makes you feel alive? Which conversations drain you? Which people make you act smaller? Which dreams keep returning even after you try to be practical? Which parts of your personality have you labeled as flaws because someone else did not know how to love them? These questions sound soft, but they are not. They threaten the identity that was built for approval. If you discover that you do not actually want the life you are chasing, then the chase becomes embarrassing. If you admit that a relationship requires your silence to survive, then the relationship looks different. If you accept that your needs are real, then your old excuses get weaker. The book is especially firm about self-acceptance. Many people think they will accept themselves after they become better, calmer, prettier, richer, more productive, more lovable, more successful, and preferably lit by professional photography. Gavrani reverses the order. Self-acceptance is not the trophy at the end. It is the ground from which real growth becomes possible. Without acceptance, growth becomes self-punishment in nicer clothing. You try to improve because you hate who you are. You treat every mistake as proof that you are behind. You use comparison as a whip. You call it ambition, but it feels like running from yourself with a motivational playlist. The book's version of solitude interrupts that chase. Alone, you can begin to ask whether the life you are building actually belongs to you. You can sit with your awkwardness without converting it into content. You can allow your emotions to exist without presenting them to an audience. You can notice that you have survived many feelings you once tried to escape. Gavrani's love for solitude is not passive. It is not just sitting in a room and waiting to become enlightened by accident. Solitude becomes valuable when it is used intentionally. You reflect. You journal. You observe your patterns. You ask yourself better questions. You make space for creativity, rest, planning, healing, and honest self-conversation. The book treats solitude as a relationship with the self. Like any relationship, it can be neglected, repaired, deepened, and made warmer. At first, being alone may feel uncomfortable because you are not used to your own company. That does not mean you are bad company. It may mean you have spent too long performing for others and too little time learning how to be present with yourself. There is also a difference between isolation and chosen solitude. Isolation cuts you off and often feeds shame. Chosen solitude gives you a boundary around your attention. Isolation says, I have no one. Solitude says, I'm spending time with myself on purpose. That purpose changes the emotional meaning of the same room. Gavrani wants readers to build a life where solitude has texture. It might include slow mornings, reading, walking, cooking for yourself, learning, making art, cleaning your space, writing honestly, exercising, praying, thinking, or simply sitting without reaching for noise. The exact activity matters less than the inner posture. You are no longer using life only to be seen. You are using life to become real. One of the book's strongest insights is that solitude reveals the difference between wanting connection and needing validation. Wanting connection is human. Needing validation as oxygen is exhausting. If you need every choice to be witnessed before it feels real, then your attention belongs to an invisible audience. Solitude helps you take it back. This does not happen in one brave afternoon. The book is more patient than that. You do not become comfortable alone by making one dramatic promise. You become comfortable by keeping yourself company repeatedly. You show up for your own routines. You make plans that do not depend on someone else's availability. You keep promises to yourself in private. Private promises matter because they build self-trust. If you constantly abandon your own intentions, you teach yourself that your word means little. Then solitude becomes harder because you are alone with someone you do not fully trust, yourself. But each kept promise, even a small one, repairs that relationship. The book also invites the reader to stop begging the wrong people to understand them. Some people will not understand your pace, your depth, your quiet, your ambitions, your sensitivity, your need for space, or your refusal to keep performing. You can explain yourself endlessly, but explanation is not magic. Sometimes the healthiest answer is to live clearly and let misunderstanding be someone else's weather. This is not arrogance. It is relief. You do not have to turn every person into a witness for your worth. You do not have to convert every critic. You do not have to win approval from people who are committed to misreading you. Solitude gives you the strength to stop auditioning. By the end of part 1, Gavrani has changed the emotional frame. Being alone is no longer just the aftermath of rejection. It can become a chosen return. You return to your preferences. You return to your unedited thoughts. You return to your body's signals. You return to the dreams that got buried under being liked. The practical challenge is simple but not easy. Spend time alone without treating it as a waiting room for someone else's attention. Do something meaningful. Notice what scares you. Notice what nourishes you. Let the silence show you what your noise has been hiding. Thank you for listening to this second episode. Next, we enter part 2, where the book becomes more practical. How to practice the art of being alone, turn loneliness into a growth period, and become your own best companion. Final close. Solitude is not proof that nobody wants you. It could be the place where you finally stop leaving yourself. Gavrani's chapter on being yourself also carries an implied warning. Not every version of authenticity is actually honest. Sometimes people use the language of being real to avoid growth, kindness, responsibility, or self-control. The book's deeper idea is not, do whatever you feel and call it truth. It is, learn your real inner life well enough that you can live from it with courage and maturity. That means being yourself includes accountability. If you're sensitive, you do not have to pretend you are made of concrete, but you still have to learn what to do with your sensitivity. If you're ambitious, you do not have to shrink so other people feel comfortable, but you still have to keep your ambition from becoming contempt. If you are quiet, you do not have to perform extroversion, but you still have to communicate when communication matters. Solitude is useful because it reveals these distinctions. In a noisy social life, you may only notice the role you play. Alone, you can examine the motives underneath. Did you say yes from generosity or from fear? Did you stay silent from peace or from self-erasure? Did you call someone toxic because they harmed you or because they failed to obey your fantasy? Solitude is not always flattering. That is part of its value. The book also pushes against comparison as a thief of identity. Comparison makes your life feel late because it uses someone else's timeline as the clock. It makes your personality feel wrong because it uses someone else's strengths as the measuring stick. It makes your progress invisible because you are staring at a stage of life that is not yours. In solitude, you can begin to ask better comparison questions. Instead of, why am I not like them? Ask, what is my actual next step? Instead of, why does their life look easier? Ask, what part of my life needs care today? Instead of, how do I become more impressive? Ask, how do I become more honest, disciplined, peaceful, and alive? Gavrani's love for solitude becomes most practical when it turns into routines. A person does not become self-connected only by having one emotional breakthrough. They become self-connected through repeated contact. A morning page, a quiet walk, a weekly review, a few minutes of cleaning before sleep, a phone-free meal, a decision made without polling 5 people. These small acts say, I'm available to my own life. There's a hidden dignity in doing things for yourself when nobody sees them. Cleaning a room for your own peace. Dressing well because you like how it feels. Studying when there is no immediate applause. Resting without needing to justify exhaustion. These private acts build the belief that your life is worth tending even when it is not being witnessed. This matters because many lonely people live as if witness creates value. A meal is better if photographed. A thought is better if posted. A day is better if someone asks about it. Gavrani's solitude asks for a quieter kind of value. Can something matter because it nourishes you, not because it performs well? The chapter also hints at boundaries. To be yourself, you need some protection around your attention. If everyone has immediate access to your time, mood, and decisions, your inner voice will keep getting interrupted. Solitude gives you a boundary where you can hear yourself before the world starts making requests. At the same time, the book does not treat solitude as escape from all difficulty. You still have to return to people. You still have to communicate. You still have to risk being misunderstood. But when you return from solitude with a clearer self, your relationships become less desperate. You are not asking every conversation to confirm your existence. You are bringing an existence into the conversation. By the end of this movement, how to be you means something more concrete than a slogan. It means stop outsourcing your identity. Stop treating comparison as truth. Stop calling self-abandonment kindness. And start building enough private self-trust that public approval no longer runs the whole house. The book's advice also becomes practical when you think about identity as a set of choices repeated in private. You're not only the dramatic decisions you announce. You're the small decisions you make when nobody is watching. What you consume, what you tolerate, how you speak to yourself, whether you rest, whether you keep promises, whether you numb every feeling or learn from it. In that sense, solitude reveals your real systems. Public life can hide disorder for a while. You can appear confident, funny, busy, and well-adjusted outside, then come home to a life that feels neglected. Gavrani's solitude asks you to look at that private life with compassion and seriousness. Not to shame yourself, but to ask what kind of care is missing. Being yourself also means making peace with seasons. The version of you that survived one chapter may not be the version needed for the next. Maybe the old you was hyper-available because belonging felt fragile. Maybe the old you was guarded because trust had been expensive. Maybe the old you chased approval because it felt like proof of safety. Solitude lets you thank those strategies for helping you survive, then ask whether they still deserve to lead. This is one of the deeper forms of self-respect. You do not have to keep living from an expired defense. You can be grateful for the mask and still remove it. You can understand your people-pleasing and still stop obeying it. You can admit why comparison hooked you and still choose a different measure. The episode's practical takeaway is to make solitude observable. Do not leave it as a mood. Get practices. Write a private list of what you actually like. Write another list of what you pretend to like. Notice who receives your real voice and who receives your performance. Choose one small truth to live this week. That is how be yourself becomes behavior instead of branding. If loneliness is going to visit, the book's question is almost rude in its usefulness. Can you make it work while it is here? Not romanticize it. Not deny it. Not post a quote over it and pretend you have become spiritually superior. Make it work. Let the lonely season become a growth period instead of a waiting room where your life sits frozen until someone chooses you. Welcome back to this summary of the art of being alone. In this episode, we move into part 2, practicing the art of being alone, turning loneliness into growth, and making a new best bud, yourself. Gavrani's practice begins with responsibility. This can sound harsh if you hear it as blame, but the book uses it as power. You may not have chosen every wound, rejection, disappointment, or lonely chapter, but you still have choices about what you build next. The lonely season can become a place where you collapse into bitterness, or a place where you start becoming the kind of person you can live with. The first step is to stop waiting for rescue as the main plan. Rescue fantasies are comforting because they delay responsibility. One day, someone will arrive, understand everything, heal the ache, make life beautiful, and finally prove you were worth loving. Very cinematic. Also a terrible project manager. The book does not say love will never come. It says your life cannot be placed on pause until it does. If you wait for another person to give your life meaning, you hand them a job no human being can do permanently. People can love you, support you, inspire you, and walk with you. They cannot become the entire architecture of your self-worth without the building eventually shaking. Practicing aloneness means creating rhythms that make your own life feel inhabited. You begin with small acts of care. Clean the space you keep postponing. Cook something because your body deserves food, not because guests are coming. Move your body because you live in it. Read something that gives your mind better furniture. Keep a notebook. Take yourself outside. Make a plan for the week. Repair one neglected corner of your life. These actions are ordinary, which is why they matter. Many people imagine transformation as a dramatic reinvention, but Gavrani is more interested in daily self-respect. A life becomes livable through repeated signals. I am here. I matter. I can care for this person I am becoming. The chapter on turning loneliness into a growth period asks the reader to use discomfort as information. Loneliness can show where you are dependent, where you are undernourished, where you need community, where you need boundaries, where you have abandoned your own interests, and where you're still trying to earn love from people who cannot give it. Instead of asking only, how do I make this feeling disappear? The book asks, what is this feeling revealing? That shift matters. If the only goal is escape, anything distracting will do. But if the goal is growth, you become more selective. You stop reaching for the easiest numbing device and start asking what your life actually needs. Sometimes the answer is connection. The book is not anti-people. If loneliness is telling you that your life lacks honest community, then growth may include reaching out, joining something, repairing a friendship, making new friends, or learning how to be vulnerable. Solitude should not become a fancy excuse for never risking closeness. Sometimes the answer is self-development. A lonely season may contain time that used to be spent chasing people, explaining yourself, performing, or recovering for relationships that drained you. That time can be used to learn, train, create, organize, study, heal, and build competence. The silence that once felt empty can become a workshop. Sometimes the answer is grief. You may need to admit that a relationship, dream, image of yourself, or old version of life is gone. Growth is not always bright. Sometimes growth is letting yourself feel what you kept outrunning. The book Solitude makes room for that too. You can be sad without turning sadness into identity. The idea of making a new best bud is Gavrani's playful way of saying something serious. Become someone you can rely on. Many people treat themselves as an enemy, a project, or a disappointed parent. They speak inwardly with contempt and then wonder why being alone feels unsafe. Of course, it feels unsafe. Who wants to spend time with a voice that insults them all day? Becoming your own companion begins with changing the inner conversation. This does not mean lying to yourself with sugary affirmations. It means refusing unnecessary cruelty. You can correct yourself without humiliating yourself. You can notice a mistake without turning it into a character assassination. You can admit weakness without deciding you are hopeless. The book's version of self-friendship includes curiosity. A good friend does not only criticize, a good friend asks, "Why did that hurt so much? What are you afraid of? What do you need right now? What pattern are you repeating? What are you proud of, but never say out loud? What would help you take one next step?" Self-friendship also includes celebration. Lonely people often become experts at noticing absence and terrible at noticing effort. They see who did not call, who did not invite, who did not choose them. They may not see that they got through a hard week, kept working, made a small change, told the truth once, or protected their peace. The book wants the reader to become a witness for their own progress. There is a subtle but important boundary here. Making yourself your best bud does not mean becoming self-absorbed. It means becoming internally accompanied. When you are internally accompanied, relationships become freer because you're not entering them starving for someone to prove you exist. This changes how you choose people. If you hate being alone, you may accept almost any company that distracts you from yourself. That is how people end up in friendships, romances, and groups that cost them their dignity. But if your own company becomes bearable, then other people's company must be more than noise. It must add something truthful. The book also encourages readers to make alone time active enough to become meaningful. Do not just sit with a phone and call it solitude. That is often loneliness with better lighting. Plan your alone time. Make it nourishing. Create rituals that make the time feel chosen. A walk without headphones, a Sunday reset, a reading hour, a private creative project, a meal cooked slowly, a list of things you want to learn. Over time, the emotional association changes. Alone no longer means abandoned. Alone means I know what to do with myself. Alone means I can rest, think, create, learn, clean, heal, and prepare. Alone means I'm still in relationship with my own life. The growth period also teaches patience. People often want to become confident immediately because insecurity is uncomfortable. Gavrani's approach is slower. Confidence grows when you repeatedly survive the situations you once feared. You go to a place alone. You make a decision alone. You spend an evening alone. You handle a feeling alone. Each repetition says, "See, you did not disappear." By the end of these chapters, loneliness has not become painless. The book is more honest than that, but it has become usable. It can point toward neglected needs and use time, weak self-trust, and the chance to build a life that does not collapse every time another person is unavailable. Thank you for listening to this third episode. Next, we finish the book with the Dream Life Plan, the Action Plan, making alone time addictive, and becoming independent without turning hard or bitter. Final close. A lonely season can become a cage, or it can become a workshop. The difference is whether you only wait inside it or start building. The growth period Gavrani describes also requires a change in how you measure progress. In lonely seasons, people often measure progress only by whether someone has arrived. Did someone text? Did someone invite me? Did someone choose me? Did I stop feeling alone? Those things matter, but if they're the only measurements, your growth remains under other people's control. The book suggests a different scoreboard. Did you keep a promise to yourself? Did you understand one pattern more clearly? Did you make your space easier to live in? Did you move your body? Did you reach out honestly instead of dramatically? Did you stop chasing someone who only responds when you disappear? Did you spend 1 hour doing something that strengthens your future? These measurements are humbler, but they are yours. They turn loneliness into a place where agency can return. You may not be able to force belonging to arrive on schedule, but you can become more prepared for healthy belonging. You can become less dependent on unhealthy belonging. You can become less willing to trade your peace for attention. Gavrani's idea of self-companionship also includes learning how to soothe without numbing. Numbing says, I cannot bear this feeling, so I will bury it under noise. Soothing says, this feeling is painful, and I can care for myself while it passes. The difference is subtle in the moment and enormous over time. Soothing may look like writing honestly, breathing, taking a walk, showering, cleaning, talking to a safe person, praying, stretching, making tea, reading, or sleeping. It does not pretend the feeling is fake. It simply refuses to let the feeling become the dictator of the evening. You are allowed to care for pain without obeying every impulse pain creates. The book also encourages a healthier relationship with desire. Wanting love is not weakness. Wanting friendship is not weakness. Wanting to be chosen is not weakness. The weakness comes when desire becomes self-betrayal. If wanting someone makes you abandon your standards, silence your instincts, or accept crumbs as a feast, then the desire needs leadership. Self-companionship provides that leadership. It tells the lonely part of you, I hear you, but we are not going to beg for a place where we have to disappear. We're not going to confuse inconsistency with mystery. We're not going to mistake anxiety for passion. We're not going to buy 1 minute of attention with 1 week of self-disrespect. This is where solitude becomes surprisingly protective. The better your own company becomes, the more obvious bad company feels. You notice when a conversation leaves you smaller. You notice when someone only likes your availability, not your personhood. You notice when a group requires you to betray your values for belonging. Alone time trains your ear for peace. The growth period also has a creative side. Many people discover that loneliness has been covering in used energy. The hours spent waiting, checking, comparing, and overthinking can be redirected. You can build a skill. You can write. You can train. You can learn a language. You can start a small project. You can create something that would not exist if you spent every free hour trying to be chosen. This is not productivity worship. The point is not to turn healing into another competition. The point is to experience yourself as a maker, not only as a person waiting to be loved. Creation restores dignity because it proves your inner life can produce something. Even a small private project can say, my attention can build, not only ache. By making yourself your new best bud, you also learn to enjoy your own humor, taste, pace, and curiosity. That may sound small, but it is transformative. A person who can enjoy themselves is less likely to treat every silence as abandonment. They may still feel lonely, but loneliness no longer has a monopoly on the room. Another useful part of the growth period is learning the difference between loneliness and boredom. They can feel similar because both create restlessness, but they ask for different responses. Loneliness may ask for connection, honesty, vulnerability, or grief. Boredom may ask for engagement, challenge, creativity, or better use of attention. If you misread boredom as proof that nobody loves you, the feeling becomes heavier than it needs to be. Gavrani's practices help because they give alone time a shape. A shaped evening is different from an empty one. An empty evening says, "Now what?" A shaped evening says, "I know how to meet myself here." That might include a walk, a meal, a chapter of a book, a workout, a call with someone safe, a learning session, or a private project. The structure is not a prison. It is a handrail. The book also implies that growth requires cleaning up the emotional diet. If every lonely moment is fed with comparison, old messages, fantasy, and content that makes your life feel inferior, then loneliness will grow teeth. You cannot keep pouring salt into the wound and then wonder why it stings. Protecting your attention is not weakness. It is basic wound care. Self-companionship, therefore, includes deciding what you will not consume when you are vulnerable. Maybe you do not check certain profiles at night. Maybe you do not reread conversations that keep you attached to confusion. Maybe you do not ask the internet to rank your life against strangers. This is not avoidance. It is stewardship. By the end of these chapters, growth looks less like becoming impressive and more like becoming trustworthy. You become someone who can notice pain, respond with care, and take one useful step. That is not dramatic, but it is durable. In a lonely season, durable is far more valuable than dramatic. At some point, healing has to become architecture. It is not enough to understand why you feel lonely. It is not enough to appreciate solitude in theory. The question becomes practical. What kind of life are you building when nobody is arranging it for you? What do your mornings, money, habits, friendships, body, room, work, and dreams say about the person you're becoming? Welcome to the final episode of this summary of the art of being alone. Here we cover the book's closing movement, building a dream life plan, turning that plan into action, making alone time addictive in a healthy way, and becoming independent. Gavrani's dream life plan begins with imagination, but not fantasy. Fantasy lets you escape your life for a while. A plan asks you to return with tools. The book wants the reader to ask what kind of life would feel meaningful if approval were not the main currency. Not what would impress everyone. Not what would prove an ex wrong. Not what would look excellent in a caption. What would actually make your life feel more alive, peaceful, honest, and yours? This question can be uncomfortable because many people have never planned from desire. They have planned from fear, comparison, family pressure, social media, survival, or the vague sense that they are behind. Gavrani's Solitude gives the reader permission to plan without an audience. The Dream Life Plan is not only about big achievements. It includes emotional life, health, learning, work, money, friendships, creativity, environment, and daily rhythms. What kind of person do you want to be when you are alone? What do you want your room to feel like? How do you want to spend free time? What skills would make you proud? What relationships deserve more care? What habits are quietly stealing your confidence? The book's strength is that it links dreaming with responsibility. A dream life is not delivered by a sudden mood. It is assembled through decisions. If you want a healthier body, there are actions. If you want a calmer mind, there are practices. If you want better friendships, there are risks and boundaries. If you want independence, there are skills to learn and excuses to retire. This leads into the action plan. The action plan matters because solitude can otherwise become another place to overthink. You can analyze your loneliness for months and still change nothing. The book keeps nudging the reader back toward movement. Choose one area. Make one plan. Take one step. Repeat before the motivational speech expires. Good action plans are specific. I will improve myself is fog wearing athletic shoes. I will walk for 20 minutes after work on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday is a plan. I will learn money management is fog with a calculator. I will track expenses every Sunday and save a fixed amount first, is a plan. Specificity turns self-respect into a calendar. The book also implies that action builds identity. You do not become independent only by thinking independent thoughts. You become independent by doing independent things, handling tasks, making decisions, earning, learning, caring for your space, managing your time, and solving problems instead of waiting for someone else to remove every difficulty. Then comes one of the most memorable ideas. Make your alone time addictive. The phrase can sound strange, but the point is to make solitude so nourishing that you stop treating it as punishment. If alone time is only empty scrolling, messy surroundings, self-criticism, and waiting for replies, of course you will dread it. You have built a terrible hangout spot and invited yourself. Gavrani wants the reader to design alone time with intention. Make it enjoyable. Make it beautiful in small ways. Create rituals that your body recognizes as care. A clean desk, a favorite drink, a walk at the same hour, a book beside the bed, a playlist for cooking, a notebook for thoughts, a learning project, a small creative practice, a weekly reset. The word addictive here points to positive reinforcement. You begin to associate your own company with relief, growth, creativity, and peace. Then you no longer need to escape yourself at every quiet moment. You may still enjoy people deeply, but you stop using them as emergency exits from your own mind. The final chapter on independence completes the book's arc. Independence is not coldness. It is not pretending you need nobody. It is the ability to stand in your own life. Emotional independence means other people's opinions matter, but they do not own you. Practical independence means you learn the skills needed to care for yourself. Social independence means you can join people without losing yourself. The book is careful here, even when its language is energetic. Healthy independence still leaves room for love, help, friendship, and vulnerability. The goal is not to become a sealed container. The goal is to stop becoming helpless whenever you are not being chosen, praised, rescued, or entertained. Independence also changes relationships. When you can be alone, you choose people differently. You do not cling to someone merely because silence scares you. You do not accept disrespect because the alternative is an empty evening. You do not make one person responsible for your entire emotional climate. That is kinder to you, and frankly, kinder to them too. Nobody enjoys being turned into a life support machine for another person's self-worth. The closing message of the book is hopeful because it is active. You're not doomed to wait for belonging. You can build belonging inside your own life. You can become familiar with yourself. You can create routines that hold you. You can turn pain into information, information into action, action into confidence, and confidence into a quieter kind of freedom. That freedom does not mean loneliness never returns. It will. The old ache may still visit on birthdays, weekends, after rejection, during transitions, or when life looks easier for everyone else. But now you have a different response. You do not have to believe every lonely thought. You do not have to run toward the nearest distraction. You can ask, what do I need? What can I build? Who can I reach out to honestly? And how can I stay with myself without turning cruel? The Art of Being Alone is ultimately a book about changing the meaning of your own company. At the beginning, aloneness looks like a verdict. Unwanted, unseen, outside. By the end, aloneness becomes a practice. Honest, creative, responsible, peaceful, and sometimes even joyful. The book's best idea may be this. Solitude is not the absence of love. It can be one form of love, especially when it teaches you to stop abandoning yourself. Once that happens, connection with others can become healthier because it is no longer carrying the impossible burden of saving you from your own life. Thank you for listening to this final episode. If this summary helped, the next step is simple. Do one small thing today that makes your own company easier to trust. Final close. The art of being alone is not learning to live without love. It is learning to become a home you do not have to escape. The Dream Life Plan in the final section also asks the reader to accept trade-offs. Every chosen life says no to other possible lives. If you want a peaceful routine, you may have to say no to constant chaos disguised as spontaneity. If you want emotional independence, you may have to say no to relationships that keep you addicted to uncertainty. If you want health, study, creative work, or financial stability, you may have to say no to the habits that quietly drain them. Gavrani's independence is therefore not only emotional. It is practical. Learn the basic skills that make you less helpless. Managing money, taking care of your room, planning your week, preparing food, protecting time, asking for help without collapsing, and solving ordinary problems. These things are not glamorous, but they are part of feeling safe with yourself. A messy life can make solitude feel worse. If your space is chaotic, your routines are broken, your money is unclear, your body is neglected, and your attention is scattered, then being alone puts you face to face with all the unfinished business. The answer is not to hate yourself for that. The answer is to begin making your life easier to inhabit. The action plan should therefore be small enough to survive real life. Many people make plans that require a completely different personality by Monday. Then Monday arrives, still rude, still Monday, and the plan collapses. The book's spirit is better served by small, repeatable actions. 10 minutes of tidying, one honest journal page, one walk, one saved amount, one lesson, one message to a healthy friend, one boundary with a draining habit. Making alone time addictive also means designing it around your actual nature. If you hate long, silent meditation, begin with a walk. If journaling feels dramatic, make lists. If cooking feels overwhelming, learn 2 simple meals. If reading is hard, start with 10 pages. The goal is not to copy someone else's aesthetic version of solitude. The goal is to build a version you will actually practice. Independence also requires emotional courage. You may have to disappoint people who benefited from your insecurity. You may have to stop explaining yourself to people who prefer you confused. You may have to let a few invitations pass because your future needs the time. You may have to be misunderstood while you build a quieter, steadier life. This is where the book's earlier lessons return. If you still believe being alone is proof of failure, every boundary will feel dangerous. Every missed invitation will feel like punishment. Every evening at home will feel like evidence. But if solitude has become home, then you can choose with more clarity. You can say yes because you mean it and no because peace is allowed. The final form of independence is not isolation. It is interdependence with dignity. You can love people, need people, miss people, and ask for help. But you do not hand them the keys to your entire identity. You remain a person with a center. You can be close without dissolving. That is the book's full journey. It begins with a lonely person trapped in a cage of rejection and comparison. It ends with a person who can use solitude as a home base, a place to recover, plan, create, grow, and return to themselves. Not perfectly, not forever cured, just less willing to abandon their own life. The final practical invitation is to make one visible change. Do not only agree with the summary. Put something on the calendar. Clean one corner. Take one solo walk. Make one financial decision. Start one learning project. Send one honest message. Delete one source of comparison. Protect 1 hour. A life changes when insight becomes behavior. And when loneliness returns, as it will, you can meet it differently. You can say, I know you. You are painful, but you're not proof that I am nothing. I can listen to what you reveal, care for what you hurt, and still build. That is the art of being alone in its most practical form. The closing chapters also ask for patience with boring foundations. Independence is built from ordinary competence long before it looks inspiring. Paying attention to money, learning how to feed yourself, keeping your living space usable, managing your calendar, taking care of your health, finishing small commitments. These things may not feel like emotional healing, but they quietly change how safe you feel in your own hands. Gavrani's dream life plan becomes stronger when it includes these foundations. A dream life is not only the beautiful destination, it is the daily infrastructure that lets you stay there. If your routines are chaotic, your attention is scattered, and your self-talk is cruel, even a dream achievement can feel unstable. The plan needs both vision and maintenance. The book's independence also has a spiritual quality, even when expressed in practical language. It asks you to stop treating your life as something that begins when someone else arrives. Your life is already happening. The hours are already passing. The room, the body, the mind, the money, the talents, the habits, and the relationships already need your participation. Waiting is sometimes necessary. Abandoning the present is not. That is why the final advice is behavioral. Create the playlist, but also take the walk. Write the dream, but also clean the desk. Imagine confidence, but also keep one promise. Want love, but also build a life that love can enter without being asked to rescue everything. The book closes best when read as a transformation of posture. At the start, the lonely person is turned outward in desperation, asking the world, "Am I worth anything yet?" At the end, the solitary person can still turn outward for love, friendship, and community, but they do so from a steadier center. They are no longer empty-handed. They bring themselves with them.